Hello again. It's a very strange thing that any criticism of the National Health Service in Britain seems to provoke the same outrage in many people that heresy would once have caused. One is apt to be asked if the American system would be preferable, where one has to pay for hospital treatment. As for the idea of privatisation, this is enough to give many otherwise sane people a fit of the vapours and have them reaching for the smelling salts. Why should this be? Just to remind viewers, after Labour won the first election after the end of the Second World War in 1945, they set about nationalising everything they could lay their hands on. This included coal, gas, electricity, railways, and of course hospitals and doctors. At one point there was even talk of nationalising banks and private schools. Most of us found that nationalised industries were not really a brilliant idea because those working for them had little incentive to do their best and knew that as a monopoly they were virtually free of competition. This has the effect, of course, of making people a little lazy and self-satisfied and stifling initiative. One saw this in the Soviet Union, and we saw it in Britain in the 1950s and 1960s. When telephones were a government monopoly in Britain, one had to go for an interview before one could get a telephone fitted. And even then you went on a waiting list. Sometimes you would have to wait 6 months to have your phone fitted. Even then you didn't actually own the telephone. It was government property. You just rented it. Gas cookers could only be bought from the nationalised industry as well. If you wanted a gas cooker, you could only buy one from the government. All this was terribly inefficient, of course, and thank goodness it's over. But in one part of the economy, this government control still exists. This is in medicine. Of course, it's not technically a monopoly because if you can afford it, you can pay privately. 11% of people in this country have private health insurance, which means that for almost all of us, about 90% of the population, we are wholly reliant upon the government-run industry. There are many disadvantages of this system, of course, which I need not go into. Central planning by government seldom works effectively in any business or industry. In the Soviet Union there were 5-year plans, and those bore little relation to the needs of the people. In Britain we have a similar system with doctors and hospitals, 5-year plans imposed from central government in the capital. These don't work well either, and there's a huge swollen bureaucracy needed to measure what is being done and report back to the commissars that their orders are being complied with. There are certainly better ways of doing this than having a national health service. One could have regional health services, and one could also make it a requirement for people to purchase their own health insurance and then be free to choose the provider. Something has to be done to this, the last great nationalised industry in Britain, because the amount spent on it is soaring, but it's still struggling. Immigration is causing a lot of problems, but the National Health Service also suffers from the same problem as any large government-controlled industry. In 2000, something over 5% of Britain's GDP was spent on public health. By 2020, this had risen to over 10%. I give a link to a graph about this in the description to this video. It cannot keep rising like this without our doing away with something else. The NHS is a huge beast. It's overweight and out of control.